In this craft meditation, we'll muse on the balance of form and function, aesthetics and practicality inherent to the creations of skilled craftspeople. We'll explore how these creations stand the test of time. We'll also tug on the thread of small versus industrial scales and how that changes the nature of craftsmanship. So if you have any pieces of clothing, jewelry, and watches and glasses count here too, sculpture, which can include masks and wigs, furniture, or tools that were made by hand, or even if you have some food that you know was made by hand on a small scale, especially local, those are great things to grab for this craft musing. Selecting a few different items of the same type, made by different artisans perhaps, will allow you to compare some of their qualities within that category. But items of different categories have different functions, which can also offer interesting comparisons. We'll begin by connecting to the present moment. So, settle into a nice, stable posture, with the hips a little above the knees on a cushion or a chair. Let the natural curves of your spine arise from this stable base. Allow tension to fall away from the arms and out of the face. Take a moment here to notice how the practical consideration of how to sit with a good posture can give rise to an aesthetic quality. The form follows the function. Become aware of your breath and all the sensations that go along with it. Notice how the breath is easier in this stable pose. A nice straight back allows the rib cage and stomach to expand and contract, moving out of the way of the lungs so that you can take nice, free, deep breaths. Nice, calm breaths. Again, there is a pleasurable aspect that arises from a practical function here. Expand your awareness to include any other body sensations or sensory stimuli happening in this present moment. Are there any pleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, or feelings happening right now? Can we find a form that follows function here too? How about the function of your opening awareness, allowing you to take note of different sensory forms that have aesthetic qualities? Now, you can take one of your craft objects and connect that to the feeling it imparts into your hands. For my practice, I have 4 pieces of jewelry. One made by an artisan I worked with in the past, one by my grandparents, another made by a friend, and the last one I made myself. In feeling out these objects, I'm first going to take note of their overall form and how each artisan created different forms and functional aspects. For these pendants, their very basic function is to stay attached to my neck. So to carry that out, they have different strands that put them at different heights and different kinds of closures so that they can get around my neck. What are the functional aspects of the objects you're exploring today? Are there any actions you need to carry out so that they can perform these functions? If so, repeat those actions a few times now with each object. Try to make note of how those actions feel as you carry them out, whether there's any resistance or ease involved. And compare that with objects that have the same functions. For variation, I also have a blanket that was made by my aunt, a crop made by my mom, and a sculpture that my grandfather started right before he passed away. These have functional aspects, like being able to cover the wearer in the case of the crop top and blanket, or being able to stand in the case of the cat. If you have any objects of different categories, or if you can see any around you, are there any functional aspects that they have in common? Or are there huge differences in the functions they perform? Now that we've explored those functional aspects, we can take note of their aesthetic qualities. Usually, people will think of how something looks when we think of aesthetics. So we can take note of any pleasing colors, color combinations, forms, combinations of forms, also called composition, and any nice lines that make up how these objects appear visually. We can also explore other sensory forms. How does each object feel in the hands? Are there pleasant textures or materials used? Has it been shaped to be pleasing to feel? With foods, there will be smells and tastes. But even some objects like my wooden cat sculpture and my woolens will have pleasing smells from those materials. Do they make any pleasant sounds? I've got my little ring recorder here to help capture some of the sounds these objects make. Finally, are any forms connected to the function? These pendants have a flatter surface on the back to make them sit properly, which gives a pleasing overall form. The chains or strands used to hold them have pleasant aspects as well. These woven fabrics have pleasant patterns that arise from the function of weaving yarn to make them able to cover the wearer. As you explore the relationship between form and function, how one can give rise to the other, you can also make note of where there is sometimes a tension of these things, where certain functions sort of push form in a direction that might be less pleasing in whatever ways, and how a skilled artisan tries to account for this. If there are any objects around of the same category, you can also compare how different artisans have solved some problems of form versus function, where they sit in a bit more opposition or have a bit more tension with each other. Artisan crafts, like a good piece of furniture that's been passed down from generation to generation in a family, can stand the test of time because they were made with care. This caretaking on the part of the craftsman has many considerations to take into account. The materials used must be durable. What kinds of materials were used for your objects? How does that make them durable? The functions they perform will need to be carried out many times if they're going to stand the test of time. So what allows this repeated action to go on without wearing out? Last, but certainly not least, the person using it needs to enjoy using it. So, how has this been crafted to create an enjoyable user experience? Is there a push and pull between, let's say, the durability of materials and the repeated actions they have to perform, and how enjoyable it is to perform those actions, like making a mechanism that's easy to use but will stand up to repeated action, or using materials that are durable but still feel pleasant. If you're a craftsperson or artisan, what qualities from these objects would you like to emulate in your own work? What skills would you need to attain to help make that happen? What cares can you take to start moving in that direction right now? Now, let's turn our attention to the scale of production. We're surrounded by objects and materials crafted by other humans. I'm sitting on a zabuton blanket and zafu that were likely made by real people, not just machines, maybe with the help of machines, but certainly on a bigger scale than the crafts I used as meditation objects. So, when you change the scale of production, how do you change the end product? Well, small-scale goods tend to have a closer connection to the end user. In the case of all these objects made by my friends and family, I have a very close connection to the people who made them. Artisan crafts made and sold by a craftsperson locally, directly to their end user, also creates a very close connection. Industrial scale products, on the other hand, tend to be more disconnected from the person using it and the person creating it. If they were handmade, there's often still a great distance in location from where they were produced and where they're sold. Sadly, there's also often a huge gap in economy for the people producing these objects and those buying them as well. How does that closeness versus distance affect the end product? Does it change how much care was taken to make something beautiful, durable, and enjoyable to use? As with other practices, I recommend a length of 30 to 45 minutes for your first time. This just helps you to cultivate the awareness of these craft objects without wandering too much into other thoughts, worries, memories, fantasies, and all the other things the monkey mind brings. If that monkey wanders, though, you can always take a deep breath and bring your attention back to the object in your hands. You can practice this with many objects around your home. An interesting version of it can be to go into different rooms and notice what kinds of objects are there. Note how many are handcrafted as opposed to mass-produced. Note the effect that has on function and form. And maybe how much you enjoy them. So to end this practice, simply take in what you've experienced in this session. Let yourself feel anything you've learned or discovered. It doesn't need to be talked out in your head, only felt. If you want to jot down any points you'd like to explore further, or perhaps in another practice, you can do that as well.
Remember that the only bad practice is the one you didn't do. So take a moment to feel some gratitude for the chance to practice today and for the efforts you put into it. Until next time.